Okay, folks, it's time to begin to use JASP. And so this little video is designed to show or to demonstrate how to load or how to, what to do with example one data that you have on your As You Learn site. And first, let's go over to that data on As You Learn. And you'll notice that you have two files, and they are both the same data. One file is in the native JASP language, or native JASP format. A JASP file contains the data plus all the program files, plus any output files, any outputs that have been generated. And so when you save a data file in JASP, you basically save the whole thing. You save the essentially everything that it needs to load in and run on the JASP program files. You also have an example in an Excel file that's a CSV file or a comma separated variable file. And so you always have the option of, when you're working in Excel and you're saving data out of Excel, you can save it out as what's called a CSV file or a comma separated file, just a simple CSV file. JASP will load either of those. Generally, the first time, obviously, the first time you load a data file, it's probably in Excel, and so you'll need to save it as a CSV. Now, you won't be able to just click on the file and load it into JASP. You'll have to download these files into onto your computer, wherever the JASP program is located, and then open them in JASP. And it's a simple, process as always. You just open files and browse and find the file and open the file. Now, once you have opened it, once you have worked with it, then when you save it out, when you save it at the end, you save it as a JASP file. Then you will not necessarily have to open files every time. You'll just be able to click on that data file off of your computer, and it will automatically load it into JASP. So I'll try to show you both ways here in just a second, so that you can see how that process works. And be aware that I'm not going to support other software programs, simply because there's just too many. And it's I don't want to spend all our class time, all the precious little time we have for this summer session, trying to teach you how to work a piece of software. This is a very intuitive piece of software, easy to work, and so that's why we've gone with JASP. So let me get out of this share, and I will I'm going to open a file folder on my machine that has some information on it. Okay. First off, I'm going to go ahead and open the example one JASP file. So let me show you what that looks like. This particular file, I've got a couple of files on here. This particular JASP file is one that I downloaded off of the As You Learn site and onto my home computer. I could just as easily done the CSV file. I just downloaded the JASP file. Now I'm going to click on this JASP file, and it's going to automatically jump into JASP for me. If that didn't work, let me go stop the share and share a different file. Now I have shared the actual JASP file itself within the program. If I had not been able to do that, if I hadn't been able to click it directly into the program, I would have gone over here into open a file, either found recent files or file on my computer, located where the file was at, and opened, browsed for that file and then opened that file. So in this instance, I would have clicked there. Now, you'll notice some of the files that it will work with. I'll mention these very quickly. It will work with SAS files. You have SAS files, different formatted SAS files here. It'll work with JASP files. It'll work with what are called save files. Those are SPSS files. And so it will open some regular files. It just won't open a regular Excel, but it will open a CSV file. So if example one was a CSV file, it would have be ready to open that too. So since it's a JASP file, I just open it up. So I just reopened the same file and actually opened a new one. There you go. Let me get rid of one of these. Okay. So we would have a file that looked like this. Now, I'm going to try to expand it out a little bit, or actually we need to run something first. So in line with the example that's on the website, the PDF example of how to run this, I'm going to I'm going to run a descriptive statistics, and you get a box that looks like this, where you have a box that you have all your variables in. You have a box this is going to be the variables you're going to use for analysis, and then this is the outcome. And so if you'll notice, there are all these screens here. It's all in one big window. Here is the data file. Here is the I saw the working file, or the working window, and then here's the results. And all these things are saved together. When you save a file out, all these things get saved together. So in this case, we're going to look at response. Now, there are some differences in variables here. Notice the little tick marks over to the side. In general, when you see one of these little ruler-like things, that means that variable is probably a continuous variable. It's a numeric variable like a score or a scale or something like that. These things that are another sort of interesting little three-circle thing, those are considered to be general variables. Primarily, they're probably variables that are categorical, in that they're either a narrative variable or a categorical variable, and the little ruler is a continuous variable. And so I'm going to click on response and slide it over into the box. Now you see it started to populate the results already, and that's one thing JASP does. It populates as you go, all the way across to results. There are 96 responses. The mean value is 42.1415. 115. The standard deviation is 11.286. The smallest value is 23. The largest is 77. But we have some different things that we can do over here, some different options. I'll expand the screen a little bit. Among those is the option to do plots. And so I'll do a distribution plot. Now your handout looks a little different, and that's because of different versions of JASP. They've kind of improved it and moved it along. And so if you've downloaded the most recent version, the one you have looks like the one on the video, and the one that on the As You Learn is slightly different, but it just doesn't have quite as much stuff on it. And so this is a distribution plot. This is like a histogram or a bar chart. If we do display density, we get something akin to a distribution line or a distribution curve. And so we end up with, you know, the notion of a distribution plot and a distribution curve has some of the characteristics of normality in that it has a large central area, but it has a very long tail going toward the higher scores. And so we would call this a skewed distribution. It would be skewed to the high side. The long tail is to the high side. We're going to not add any more plots, so I'll decrease that. We'll go into the statistics. I'm going to add the median because that's an interesting quantity to know. If you want to know the direction of that a distribution is skewed, we talk about distribution skewed to the right or a positive, distribution skewed to the left or a negative. The distribution is always skewed in the direction where the mean is higher than the median or lower than the median, whichever direction the mean is. If the mean is higher than the medians, then you have a positive skew to the right. If the mean is lower than the median, then you have a negative skew to the left. In this case, the mean, 42.115, is higher than the median, and so the skew is in a positive direction or to the right. We'll talk a little bit more about what skew means as we go along, but in general, we look for the mean and the median to be fairly close together to describe normality. And so if distribution is positive, negative, you know, the skewness doesn't matter too much unless it gets skewed high in one direction or low in another direction. And then we talk about maybe this is a normal distribution, and most of our statistics are based on the assumption of, or at least the likelihood of a normal distribution. And so you have some control here over, you know, different statistics that you can run. I'm going to throw in this one too, SE mean, standard error of the mean, because sometimes we use the standard error of the mean as a good way of describing how spread out a distribution is. And we'll talk more about that later, because that comes into play when we do comparisons between groups. And we can get rid of that. If we want to, we can then simply have a, you know, an output screen, do everything on the output screen. All of these things are capturable. You know, we can, you know, capture these distribution plots. We can copy it. We can drop it directly into a Word document or any sort of word processing document. We can drop it into Excel. We can, do it in different places. And so the data, once we get a result, the data results are easy to work with. If we go back over here and, we change something, for example, let's say I want to look at dosage, move that over there. But I know that dosage is, when you look at the distribution plot for dosage, it's, one of 4 categories. And so we know it's a categorical thing. We can look at a frequency table, and a frequency table will tell us that, okay, there's a 0 dose, there's 24 of those, that's 25% of it, that adds up to 100%. And so, for things that are categorical, and it will make the decision for you. For things that are categorical, it will create frequency tables. If response, which is not categorical, so it doesn't create a frequency table, it leaves it in, which gets kind of unusual to try to look at a frequency table of a continuous variable. But for dose, which is a categorical variable, it knows to automatically create a frequency table if we ask for them. And so, we've got these tabs over here. So that is getting into JASP, the 3 panels in JASP, how to work with those panels, things like that. And, you can always, just have a blank JASP file, or you can, load it into a new JASP file, or you can create this massive JASP file. But typically you don't want to create too big a one, because there are limits as to how much data it will process depending upon the available memory and the available RAM memory on your computer. And so it won't process more data than your computer can possibly handle. And so that's running JASP. If you close it now, you can either save it as, you can save it out, or you can save it as to your computer, or you can just save it back to the same original file if you want to use the save menu. Or if you just close the file, it will automatically ask you, do you want the changes before the file closes? And so if I save this, then all these changes, like the frequency table, things like that, will be loaded back into this file, and the file will be there to use again. So I just save it out. It will. Oh, it's been used by another application, so I got to get rid of this thing. Okay. So I can do save as on my computer. And we'll just call this version 1 of example 1. And save it. And then I can close it. And that's simply playing around with JASP. And we'll talk more about this on Wednesday night, just to see if there's questions you have about it. I won't necessarily run through the whole thing again, but we'll have that set up, and then you'll kind of dive right into this, because there'll be some stuff to look at before in the next week or so, that will deal with answering particular questions about descriptive statistics and inferential statistics. And so that's the end of this one. The next one will be related to differences between groups. And so we'll be talking about what are called t-tests, and you might go into the online stats booklet or book that's in your Azure Learn site, and go to the section on t-test and begin looking at information about t-test. So have a good day, and I'll hopefully see you soon.